And stupid grit is when you don't listen to other people, your board of directors, your head of marketing, your best friend, someone who is trying to coach you that your situation has changed. The data that's coming in doesn't match your overly optimistic idea about what you can sell and how you can sell and how quickly you can expand. So what you find is that the people who make the best decisions have a personal board of directors or an actual board of directors or both. And they've agreed ahead of time to listen to them when difficult decisions need to be made. They've deputized them to gather information and come back to them with information they need to act on. What you find is the people who don't have quit criteria are arrogant. And over and over and over again, you see companies going under because of the arrogance of a CEO who doesn't want to listen to the CFO, doesn't want to listen to good reason, just is convinced that they know what's right. A hubris that is just hard to describe because it's so toxic.
Caroline, you're very welcome to the ScaleX Insider Podcast. Delighted and thrilled to have you on the show today.
Makes two of us. Thank you.
Brilliant. We've had a lovely conversation off air, so I'm looking forward to this one. You know, our vision is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small and medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So, Caroline, as I kick off the show every time with this question to all of my guests, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
What it means to me is scaling the best possible version of yourself into the world so that other people flourish and are awed and inspired to live their best lives as well.
I love that. I love that. And we're all on that journey. And certainly you have written lots and put lots of value out into the world to support people with scaling themselves. For those who are listening, you'll not be able to see me holding up Caroline's wonderful new book, Big Goals, The Science of Setting Them, Achieving Them, and Creating Your Best Life. I absolutely love this book, Caroline. For the benefit of our listeners, there are lots of books out there on big goals, and achieving goals and goal setting. What is it about your story that you felt compelled to write this book?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And thank you for having me. And thank you for opening with such an important question. I felt compelled to write this book because I returned to school in 2005. I was in the first class of 32 people at the University of Pennsylvania in the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology. So that's the science of happiness. And so the father of positive psychology, Marty Seligman, became one of my most important mentors. Because in that class of 32 people, we got to define for the rest of the world, what could we do with the science of happiness to change the world? I chose goal setting because in October of 2005, we were assigned goal setting theory by Locke and Latham. And at that point, as a credentialed coach of many years with phenomenal clients, I was being held accountable by the International Coach Federation to manage progress, accountability, and goal setting for my clients. And I thought I understood and knew goal setting. I owned Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, Stephen Covey. I had them all. I thought I understood goal setting. And the fact of the matter was, the moment I got that assignment in October of 2005, Locke and Latham's goal setting theory, number one theory of 73 management theories in industrial organizational psychology, number one, uncontested. I realized I knew nothing about goal setting. And not only that, I realized the rest of the world knew nothing about goal setting. And I set out to change that first in my field of coaching, executive coaching, by writing Creating Your Best Life. That was my capstone project that year that matched the science of happiness with the science of goal setting. That blew the mass market up because the mass market had never seen science associated with goal setting. But 15 years later, what I realized is the world is in a worse situation, but also in an extraordinarily unusual situation being post-COVID, because this is identical to what happened after the Black Death period in the Middle Ages, when the Renaissance emerged and everything became evidence-based, how people were buried, banking, social classes, everything became more evidence-based and science-focused. And Leonardo da Vinci is the perfect epitome of that, geometry, math, science, all in his art. And I realized that what we have now is a period that's identical to that, where we need to make it goal setting evidence-based. It is all zombie theories right now, theories that should be dead, but they're still walking among us, like SMART goals, or the law of attraction. And so I really do believe that the world is desperate for the science of goal setting because everyone has dreams, but most people don't have the tools to accomplish those dreams and make them come true. And I'm determined to change that.
Oh, this is wonderful. Will you head me at the acronym BRIDGE? I love acronyms as a way to learn and embed information and really internalize it. We're going to come to that in a moment. I want to pick up because, like you, students certainly of Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, Tony
Yeah.
Robbins,
Yep. Yep.
everyone that you've mentioned,
Everybody. Yeah.
until I picked up your book, I had never heard of Locke and Latham. Why have I not heard of Locke and Latham? Well, that just could
Yeah.
be something to do with my ignorance, but who are Locke and Latham for the benefit of our listeners, and why has their goal setting theory really riveted you to bringing the science of goal setting to the world?
Yeah. Well, that is the core difference between my book and every other evergreen book that comes out from an influencer or usually a white man standing on a stage talking about motivation and goal setting and the rest of it. Because I brought science to the world. And the reason why this science, Edwin Locke and Gary Latham, these two men who worked for decades, just doing great research from the 1960s until 1990, when they published goal setting theory, which was this extraordinary, simple theory. And so they did this research both singly and then came together. Instead of being rivals, they decided to join forces. How unusual is that? To bury your ego and decide to work with somebody else to make sure that the theory is as accurate as possible. And what they did was they saw that the best possible outcomes for goals are when they're challenging and specific. But they divide goals into two buckets: learning goals and performance goals. We'll call performance goals for the rest of this podcast checklist goals because it's too confusing for people to hear about performance goals because everything's a performance. Checklist goals and learning goals. And, this theory, they never sought the stage. They don't have podcasts. They're not invited by companies to give rousing keynotes where they have people walking on coal or whatever. That's why people don't know it, because it's been stuck in the ivory tower in academia. And it just grabbed me, first of all, because I thought I understood goal setting. And the minute I read goal setting theory, I thought, my God, I know nothing. And not only that, the world knows nothing. And we deserve better. So there is this great saying like that there's a supply and delivery problem with academia to the real world. And I just realized goal setting is one of the things that just never got out of academia unless you went to business school and they actually taught it. Other than that, where were you going to learn it? I don't know.
Wow, I just love your passion for this. I love it. Before we get into the detail and really step our listeners through this science-backed framework for setting goals, for implementing goals, for really achieving goals. Why big goals? Why, you write that about the importance of setting big goals, that they should be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about these bigger goals, these bolder goals, that actually lead to better outcomes?
Well, so I think there's two questions in there. Why big goals, and then why doing hard things? Why should we do those? So Locke and Latham were very clear that whether it's a big goal or a small goal, the best results always come from being outside of your comfort zone, challenging and specific. That was a finding. And then they also found that the world rewards big, hard goals. The world does not, it just doesn't reward people who do mediocre things. It doesn't reward people who just set inside of the comfort zone goals. Think about the Olympics for a second. Are there any participation trophies at the Olympics? Of course they're not. People tune in to watch because people are leaving it all on the floor. They're doing hard things, and they've often made sacrifices for years, if not decades, to become the best they can be. And so big goals are life-changing goals. Big goals are fork in the road goals where you have to make a hard choice to go this way or that way. But big goals change people's lives. They also change the lives of organizations and companies. Why do we put a man in space? Because we have to, because the moon is out there. Just think about JFK's great speech in 1963. Why do we set hard goals? Is because when we set hard goals, we accomplish far more than we thought we could. Even if we don't reach that goal, we often get so much further than if we set what Locke and Latham call low goals. Or no goals. So there's three kinds of goals: hard goals, low goals, no goals. And I chose big goals because I really do believe in the power of big goals to transform people's lives and what they believe they're capable of and what awes and inspires other people. But also because big goals require grit. And grit is the X factor of success. And we also know one more thing I'm going to say, and then I'll let you ask another question. At the end of every day, what we know is that people scan their days for what they did that day that they're proud of. They just do. We all are looking to feel a little bit more masterful, a little bit prouder of ourselves, to build self-confidence and self-esteem. And so if that's what we're doing subconsciously, we have to ask ourselves, well, what are the things we did that are hard that day outside of our comfort zone? Because the research shows that's the only thing that builds self-confidence and self-esteem. It's the only thing. And so if we're scanning our days every day for what we did that was hard, because that's how we build pride, then we have to talk about big goals and we have to talk about grit. So that's why I went in that direction, and it makes a lot of sense.
Well, this book and your work could serve as a wonderful antidote as to why less than 1% of small to medium-sized enterprises are currently achieving scale. Just to share with you a little bit of context, in the UK, and we don't have figures for the US, unfortunately, but in the UK, there's an institute called the ScaleUp Institute, founded by a wonderful lady called Sherry Coutu, who scaled a business called Interactive Investor, exited that business and felt compelled to actually really understanding the ecosystem for small and medium-sized enterprise scale-ups. A lot of attention to startups. The big corporates, the big seven, of course, command their fair share of attention because they have much bigger marketing budgets. But the SMEs are the fabric of our society. And in the UK, they contribute, or certainly by volume, they represent more than 99% of all businesses. There are 5.7 million of them. They contribute 2.3 trillion pounds worth of revenue to the UK economy. 1.3 trillion of that, a quarter of the total revenue of the UK economy, comes from 26,000 SMEs, and those are the scale-ups. Now, we want to turn the dial up on that. A lack of ambition of the leader was cited as the single greatest impediment as to why companies don't scale. So their lack of ambition around setting big goals is why the economies at large across the globe are performing as they are. There's so much more potential in that. So I just wanted to share that context because this is critically important. Now, what struck me, I'm going to just read a line back to you from the book. This really, I found this really profound. We only succeed in our goals when we are in a flourishing emotional state beforehand. We do not become happy because we achieve something. We prime the pump for success when we elevate our well-being first in a variety of ways. Tell me about this.
Gosh, okay. So I already mentioned the absolutely seminal moment in my life where the scales fall from my eyes, and that was October of 2005. So when I was introduced to Locke and Latham's goal-setting theory. But a few weeks before that, I was introduced to the theory or the finding that you just quoted. And it was a meta-analysis written by Sonia Lyubomirsky, Ed Diener, and Laura King, three of the top people in the field of psychology, let alone positive psychology, and their meta-analysis on every single finding that related to success had found that success in every field, whether it was relationships or religion or business or money or child raising or whatever it was, every single instance of success was preceded by people being in a flourishing state, i.e. happy, content, proud, love. All, there are like 11 words for flourishing. And so why is that? Why does all success come after you up your well-being? So the first person to ask that question and answer it was Barbara Fredrickson at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in the United States. And she asked the question, well, what good from an evolutionary perspective is happiness? We know what the evolutionary perspective of depression or sadness is. It's because people worry and they create, things around them. They notice the saber-toothed tiger. They arm up with weapons. They prepare for disaster. But what is the advantage of happiness? So Barbara Fredrickson came up with this elegant theory, broaden and build. Broaden and build says that when you are flourishing, when you're happy, content, satisfied, love, pride, awe, a couple things happen. One is you're more curious. You're more curious about the world around you. You're more curious about the people you're interacting with. So you're adding incredibly valuable information that tells you how to operate, how to build friends. So you take in more data. Your eyes are even a little bit wider open. You take in more data from the environment because you can see more. But you build relationships with other people. So you broaden your thinking, you broaden your curiosity, and you build durable social relationships with other people. And because of that, you have more zest, more optimism, more friends, more soft places to fall, more ideas, better brainstorming. You think more broadly, you take in more of the world. That's why happiness from an evolutionary perspective matters. So when Sonia, Ed, and Laura King went and asked this question, of course they found that all success in life is preceded by being happy first. Sonia, by the way, who's a friend of mine, is now replicating all that research in other cultures around the world. So it's an even stronger finding now than it was in 2005. But talk about the doors being blown off your consciousness. I read that 36-page meta-analysis, and now I've read it many times because it belied everything I'd ever been taught. I'd been taught growing up in DC that, girls prep school, and I was supposed to go to Harvard. I actually went to Harvard, thank God, because that was the goal, that if I kept achieving these external values that are related to success, I'd be happy. And I was never happy. I was dying from bulimia at that time. Nothing ever felt like enough. And if I could have relived my life with that one finding, happiness precedes success, so many things in my life might have been different. So much, struggle would have been eliminated. Not that struggle is bad, though. But talk about reliving your life as you're, thinking, what might have been different if I'd known this finding? So I'll just bottom line it for people interested in goal setting. It's unprofessional to talk about goals unless you first cite this finding. You must start with the science of positive psychology and flourishing, because if you're not upping your well-being through the variety of positive interventions we now know work for everybody, you are not necessarily setting the table for success with any of your goals. You can have great strategy, you can have money, you can have a lot of things going your way, but if you're not flourishing first, what's the point? Because you've already shot yourself in the foot.
There's so much in there. We're going to come to those interventions you've mentioned. You said the interventions that everyone knows, but we'll not make any assumptions. And I want to be super practical for our listeners so that they can take away 1, 2, 3 things from actionable things from this podcast. We'll not assume that people are aware of these interventions. We'll come to that, I suspect, whenever we get into the investments element of your bridge framework. Thank you for sharing, by the way, the background to your struggle. And I know, coming from a lineage of Olympians, there was huge pressure on you growing up as a young child, as a teenager, to perform, to achieve at a very, very high level, which manifested certainly in your eating disorder, which you're very honest about in your book, and you've shared in public. And it's wonderful that actually you're bringing that story to the world, and you are explicitly informing people that your happiness is not going to come as a result of you achieving the next revenue milestone, the new car, the new house, the next
Position.
relationship.
Yep.
This all starts, and in the context of scaling, it's why we have actually put your psyche as the very first principle of the 10 principles of scaling. You must get yourself into an empowered state first and foremost to actually undergird success. So thank you for that. So let's we've teased the listeners with the bridge acronym. Let's kick off. I'd love to do a little mini masterclass on bridge, if you would.
Sure.
So the B in bridge, where do we start with setting our goals?
Well, so B is brainstorming, because I found, and I work as an executive coach, I just already said that, but I work with companies all over the world, and the brainstorming is so ancient in terms of how people do it. They get together in a room, or they go to a strategy offsite, or whatever. But there are a lot of ways to brainstorm that are actually ineffective. And if anybody knows Daniel Kahneman's work, he won a Nobel for his work on the anchoring thesis, where the first idea thrown out there is what people anchor to. Imagine a CEO sitting in a room brainstorming, he throws out an idea. He has just anchored the conversation and silenced everybody else. Psychological safety fits into that too, but brainstorming is incredibly important. And the first question I always tell people to ask is, what's new? What's new out in the world? What's new with technology? What's new with research on psychology? What's new on gender? What is new? Because the world has turned upside down in the last 5 years. Again, just like after the bubonic plague. And things are new now. And whatever you did to accomplish your goals before this, even if it was routine to you and you were successful, ask yourself always what's new first. So brainstorming's number one.
Brilliant. And there's lots new at the moment. AI specifically, you talk about being an executive coach. Rob and I were just having a chat off air before we began, and there is a line of thinking that actually we're potentially the last generation that have humans as our coaches, given the power of AI. So it's interesting, certainly in terms of how it has the potential to disrupt many industries, including, of course, the coaching industry.
Yes.
Brainstorming. Okay, the R in bridge.
Relationships. I mean, we were bottom lined over and over in my year at Penn, but it's only gotten stronger since then, that happiness comes down to 3 words: other people matter. And so it's not just the relationships that make you a better man or woman. It's not just the relationships that uplift your well-being, because again, happiness precedes success. It's about the relationships that take you down. And so you also have to know exactly who are the people you have to put a container around and minimize their presence in your life. And for women, this is incredibly important, more than for men, because 84% of women say that they're surrounded by frenemies, friends who are enemies, because they don't want the world to think they're not nice. I mean, the double bind and the triple bind that women face when it comes to goal setting or just operating in the world is incredible, but it really undermines women's goal accomplishment, the ways in which women shoot at each other inside the tent. So you really have to be a little bit ruthless about whose support do you need in your organization. What silo are you not communicating with, but you're going to need them in a month or 2 months or 3 months, and they need to know what your timeline is. So what relationships are important that will be on this journey with you, and then which ones have to be silenced, contained, both personally and professionally. So that's why relationships matter so much.
There's a number of things in there, and I invite my clients, my coaching clients, to conduct an energy audit of the radiators in their life, those people who bring wonderful energy, and the drains, those who actually take away the energy. And I've used that word ruthless quite a lot in the context of my own network. I am absolutely privileged to have an incredible network of people that I would say have been ruthless about building in the last 10 years to remove those who are drains and to actually fill my network with radiators. So I have a network full of radiators. In the context of relationships, what advice would you give our listeners when they've come from the brainstorming, when they're starting to get excited about a big goal, a new idea?
Right.
Who should they lean on in relation to the relationships in their lives?
Well, I am going to go right to the research from Shelley Gable at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And she did this stunning research. I still remember the name of the research that got my attention. It's called What Happens Between Friends When Things Go Right? And that question ended up being how she studied the quality of relationships. And she found that there are 4 ways to respond to someone's good news. What happens between friends when things go right? So when things go right, there are 4 ways to respond. There's only one way that tells you that that person has your back. They want you to succeed. They're going to be happy for you. They'll be supportive of you. And that is something called active constructive responding, curiosity and enthusiasm. And when there's anything other than that, changing the subject, being passive aggressive, being actively destructive, that tells you that that person should not be privy to your dreams and goals. They should not have access to you, maybe as freely as they once did, even if it's someone in your family, especially if it's someone in your family. Because a lot of women very quickly identify a sister or a mother who is standing in the way of their success. Why is that? Because in the last 90 years, the one area where women have made no progress whatsoever, in terms of perception, public perception, corporate perception, et cetera, is if they are agentic and goal-directed. And so when women are ambitious and goal-directed and proud, who comes after them? Both men and women. And so women are not allowed to be big dreamers, goal setters. They play small as a result, and the relationships in their lives are often why that happens.
As you're speaking, I'm thinking of my 2 daughters. I can't wait to release this episode and share it with them. So, so important. And what you're sharing resonates so strongly, and certainly with in my own life, with some of the females in my own life, and how they've been impeded because of relationships that have actually killed the goal before it's even allowed to breathe any life into it. So relationships, the eye and bridge.
Investments, the investments of time, of energy, of money. Let's say you want to build your business by having more of a speaking presence. You may have to hire a speaking coach. You may have to work with someone for 6 months and be videotaped and critiqued and the rest of it. Investing your character strengths. I send everyone to the free 15-minute test, the Values in Action Character Strength Survey via character.org. I get nothing from this. Just want to put it right out there. There's no kickbacks happening. There's nothing. But I do believe it is the most powerful character strength test in the world. It's been taken 50 million times. It was created by my 2 mentors, Chris Peterson and Marty Seligman, who started the field of positive psychology. It ranks your character strengths from 1 to 24. And your top 5 are where you're most likely to have the most success in using them in goal pursuit, but also using them to flourish. And so, investing your character strengths. So money, time, energy, anything else that involves you putting time and money towards building the platform. I'll say one thing about that. Many people are familiar with James Prochaska's Stages of Change research that came out in the 1970s. And so it's got 6 stages: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, attainment, and then discontinuing or disconnecting. And so what I'm talking about with the investments is the preparation phase, which Prochaska found is the most important part of any goal pursuit, any strategy building. Is, are you building the platform upon which you need to, lay your groundwork and spring from? And too many people want to rush into action. And action is not successful unless the strategy is well formed, and investments are a huge piece of that. So you have to be diligent and thorough in how you do that step, or you'll have to go back and repeat it. That's also what Prochaska found, is if you skip a step, you have to go back. So I found the same thing with bridge.
Number of things in there. I took the values in action assessment. Actually, it's wonderful. It likely won't surprise you that learning and growth is my number one, hence why I read a lot. Yeah, love of learning. Yeah.
Not surprised.
And it's just wonderfully simple. We'll put a link to that assessment in the show
Great.
notes because it's
Great.
such a wonderful resource. In terms of building that scaffolding of support, Caroline, what does that look like practically? What would you encourage our listeners to do? So the investment in the practice of a new skill, let's say, for me, this has been very much an investment in, I never hosted a podcast. I came from scaling a business, but I wanted to bring the message and the importance of scaling with purpose to the world. So I'm still learning the skill. We're 200 episodes in almost and still developing the skill. But again, the investment was in public speaking, lessons, and coaching, all of those things that are conducive to hopefully being a better podcast host, a better speaker on stage in relation to keynotes. So that makes sense. What else should we do in relation to the construction of that scaffolding of support? And I sense here, we mentioned performance goals and learning goals right at the outset. Performance goals being those checklist goals for something that you're already familiar with and want to get better at. Learning goals, maybe I feel that what I've done here falls into the learning goals. So share with us a little bit more about building that scaffolding of support in the context of learning goals.
Right. So let's just define learning goals and checklist goals for a second to make sure people are following along with us. So Locke and Latham, after lots of research, found that challenging and specific, targets will always elicit best outcomes. Then they found that there were two kinds of outcomes. One is a checklist goal, something you've done before. Let's say you're on your 150th podcast. It has now become a checklist goal for you. The first 5 to 10 may have been learning goals. You were learning what microphone you liked. Did you have to put more foam core on your walls? Did you like Zoom, or did you want to try SoundCloud? Whatever it was. That was when you were in a learning goal phase. Learning goals become checklist goals. So what you want to invest in, particularly for learning goals, is where you're going to efficiently get the information you need to do what it is that's in front of you. So let's say you want to be a triathlete, but all you know how to do is bike and run. You've never swum. What's an investment for you? An investment would be something like total immersion training, joining a triathlon team, getting swim lessons. One of the examples in my book, as you know, is a friend of mine who swam the English Channel last August. And so his name's Dennis Crean. He's in the excellence chapter. So what did he have to invest in? He had to invest in a chiropractor regularly. He had to invest in learning how to breathe differently so that his shoulder wouldn't cramp in the 12 and a half hours he was swimming across the English Channel. On and on and on. How to eat, how to recover. So that's what you're investing in. You're investing in, for learning goals in particular, all of the things you need to access as far as skills and knowledge. So checklist goals are things you have done before. And because of that, they can fit on a checklist just like a recipe. So you're making grandma's oatmeal raisin cookies and you've made it 1,000,000 times and it's always turning out perfectly because you've played with the recipe. But then along comes an air fryer. Along comes a convection oven. You're back to adding some learning, like what's new, I said, is the first question in brainstorming. What's new? So you have to add the knowledge that will make you as excellent as possible, even if you've done it before. So what you're doing is you're basically surveying the world and saying, what do I need to know, whether it's a learning goal or a checklist goal, that will make me as efficient and excellent as possible. And so that is how you go about that. So one more thing I'll throw in. The ancient Stoics talked about premeditatio malorum. The ancient Stoics said you must premeditate the evils on the path in front of you before you go out and try to do something. Because if you're not figuring out what could go wrong, these are called premortems in a lot of companies, then you're not really preparing yourself for the obstacles that lie ahead of you. So that's what it's like to prepare a platform upon which to just build your strategy and leap.
We hosted the wonderful Professor Damien Hughes, who hosts the High Performance Podcast, performance psychologist, and he referred to the importance of pre-mortem. So I think sometimes we can get carried away with the fantasy of dreaming and the bigger goal and it can seem counterproductive to actually think about what might go wrong, but ultimately it's steeped in science and research, the importance of
Oh, yeah.
actually familiarizing ourselves with some of the challenges. So ultimately, when we encounter, if we encounter those challenges, we've
Right.
already assessed them. I'm smiling as you talked about the learning goal around triathlon. I booked a triathlon before I could swim, and I bought the total immersion
Oh,
swimming
no
DVD.
kidding.
I did. I bought the total immersion swimming DVD, and I used to lie on the couch in the evenings, practice the stroke that was demonstrated in the video, and then go into the pool the next day and try and perform this. It was successful to a degree. I got through my first triathlon, but it was only when I got a coach that actually things started to change. But there we go. I
Yeah.
was smiling. I was thinking,
Yeah.
Caroline has been in our house. So,
No, but isn't that interesting? Because it's not like you don't know how to run or bike. It's not like you don't know how to do a triathlon. But what do you have to learn to get better? And all these new gadgets and wearables that have come out, and the goo that you can have. And now it's this baking soda in gel from Sweden that all these Olympians who set world records in the last Olympics were taking baking soda in gel. Oh, wow, brand new technology. You always got to start with what's new. But even if you've done something before, you could always get a little bit better because there's so many breakthroughs in AI and technology and all kinds of things. So even if you've done it before, ask yourself, is there another way to get better at this? Is there a faster suit I can wear? Is there a better helmet? Is there a lighter bike? I mean, there's just a lot. So anyway.
brilliant. The D in the bridge acronym,
Yeah. Can I say one thing about investment for 1 second about daydreaming
please.
about the future? Okay. So we were talking about premeditatio malorum. Premeditate the evils that are in front of you. That's part of a strategy. But it was Gabrielle Ottingen at NYU who came up with this whole term called positive fantasizing. And she found that people who just fantasize about standing on a platform, they've got the gold medal, or they achieve the deal that would allow them to double their company in size. If you spend too much time imagining that all of these things have happened to you, you start to delude yourself into thinking you've done more work than you have. So these positive fantasies can derail you because you stop working as hard. And that's one of the downsides to having a vision board and just dwelling on positive fantasies, is because you can start to believe that you've done more work than you have, which is why there's other things you have to do in order to create your strategy other than just thinking that's the outcome I'm looking for.
Does your research suggest that the vision boards, a version of vision boards, whether that's creating, a Pinterest mood board,
Right.
whether that's journaling and scribbling, your vision, whether it's going through magazines and cutting things out, printing things off, has this still a place in the context of starting to see what your big goal manifested might look like?
Yes, it does, for several reasons that I don't think are always tied together. You just don't want to spend too much time on the future, fantasizing about the future. It has a place because what you're doing is you're priming your subconscious and your conscious. And this was back to Locke and Latham. Gary Latham spent some extra time that Edwin Locke didn't necessarily spend time on, proving that if you have goals that are in your subconscious, maybe they're on your vision board, and something in the environment triggers you to think goal-directed thoughts about that primed goal that is somewhere in your brain, you will make progress on both the conscious goal you're pursuing and the subconscious goal you're not even aware of. It's spending too much time on that has been proven to be the problem without creating a strategy. So what Gabrielle Ottingen came up with that a lot of people like is something called WOOP, wish, obstacle, overcome, plan. You must plan. And that's what we're really talking about here is obstacles will occur. You better have a strategy, which leads us to decision making. And I love to quote Annie Duke, the woman who won the World Series of Poker, because fewer than 5% of poker players are women, by the way. So she said, and other women who've done very well in Texas Hold'em in particular, is that you have to know the psychology of the people at the table with you. And as a woman, you got to know, how do they see women? And if they're not aware of how they see women and they're not aware of the things they're saying that are sexist, that female poker player is going to outplay you. So when it comes to decision making, Annie Duke talks about having quit criteria, which is really important. You don't just want to go after a goal and have no quit criteria, not know when to turn around as you're approaching the top of a mountain and the Sherpas are saying, oh no, the avalanche is coming, we got to turn around there. Like, no, we got 50 feet to get to the top. That's called summit fever. And so that's what happens when you don't have quit criteria. You have to know when to pivot or to pause because the market changed on you. Suddenly people don't want to buy luxury RVs for whatever reason. Gas prices have gone up. You can't keep your strategy the same. So part of decision making is, when do you make your best decisions? Who's in the room when you're making your best decisions? Do you have noise or bias in your decision making? So bias is a very well-known topic. Noise is less well-known. And it's really important that people understand that 50% of the variability in people's decision making is because of noise. It costs companies more money than bias does. And what that means is you've got identical situations coming at you, but you're making different decisions on different days because maybe you didn't get enough sleep. Maybe your soccer team didn't win over the weekend. But it's variables in the person's life that lead them to make different decisions about hiring, about firing, about investing in something. So you have to know what's the noise that's entering your decision making. So those are a few of the things that I find really are not well thought through as part of a strategy.
How do we know whenever we're 5 feet from the summit after an exhausting climb,
Yeah,
but we simply can't see the top because right now it's clouded over, or actually we're on the wrong mountain?
right. Or you have high altitude sickness and it's just no oxygen reaching your brain.
Yes.
It's
So
really, right.
the question,
Yeah,
I suppose, just to give to add to it.
yeah,
Remember, less than 1% of SMEs are achieving scale.
right.
This is challenging, and often,
Mm-hmm.
we're 5 feet from the summit, but we decide to return back, and we were almost there,
Right,
but
right.
we've decided actually that this is too tough.
Yep,
We weren't able to see if we just took a few more steps.
right,
We had done this, we had achieved this,
right.
versus actually we're on the completely wrong mountain.
It's such a good question because what this really comes down to is arrogance versus humility. And so, since G is the next thing in bridge methodology, good grit, I'll just, foreshadow it by saying there's something called stupid grit. And stupid grit is when you don't listen to other people, your board of directors, your head of marketing, your best friend, someone who is trying to coach you that your situation has changed. The data that's coming in doesn't match your overly optimistic idea about what you can sell and how you can sell and how quickly you can expand. So what you find is that the people who make the best decisions have a personal board of directors or an actual board of directors or both, and they've agreed ahead of time to listen to them. To listen to them when difficult decisions need to be made. They've deputized them to gather information and come back to them with information they need to act on. So I quote Serena Williams in the book. Serena Williams, probably the greatest female tennis player of all time. Some people think the greatest tennis player of all time. But she says, I have no Control Alt Delete button in my body. I don't know. Whoops, I'm trying to fix this. I don't know how to quit because I'm so committed to the goals that I'm pursuing. And so she has a bunch of people around her, a coach, a husband, her sister, her best friend, whatever. And when they come to her and say, we're concerned about you, it's time to just leave tennis for 6 months or back out of this tournament, she listens. What you find is the people who don't have quit criteria are arrogant. And over and over again, you see companies going under because of the arrogance of a CEO who doesn't want to listen to the CFO, doesn't want to listen to good reason, just is convinced that they know what's right. A hubris that is just hard to describe because it's so toxic.
You've spoken about grit and kind of the importance of having, sensible grit versus stupid grit. But in terms of actually supporting us through that last 5 feet, let's say we're just about to reach our goal.
Yep.
What practical things can we embed in our daily routines
Right.
to support us on the tough days, which in the context of scaling, there are going to be many challenges out
Yes.
there. How do we give ourselves let's say a performance advantage?
Okay. So performance advantage, first of all, comes from what we've talked about already, which is emotional flourishing. So are you building in gratitude practices? Are you building in altruism? Are you building in the use of your character strengths? Are you building in exercise, which has been found to be a huge mood booster? Have you built in meditation or mindfulness? All of these things, journaling even, have been found to really change people's well-being. So how do you develop resilience? As you boot up your well-being first. Secondly, accountability, being accountable to other people about what you need to do. So let's say it's not stupid grit, it's just grit. It's just something really hard that you have to do. I found over and over when I wrote the book, Getting Grit, the thing I found among people who had good grit, the kind of really, incredible grit, passion, persistence, and purpose, that awed and inspired others, is they all had a channel in their brains they went to, a pre-agreed upon channel. When things got tough, physically tough, emotionally tough, whatever, they went to a channel in their brain, they switched the channel, and what they saw was, let's say, a grandmother telling them that they could do anything they wanted. All they had to do was, persist one day at a time, one step at a time. Or there was a biblical phrase for people who were spiritual, or there was a song lyric, but there was something they went to ahead of time. So mindset helps, the ability to be resilient, to kind of pick yourself back up. One world champion mountain biker I interviewed has a pain cave. She goes to a pain cave when she wants to quit. So that's a piece of what you have to do. But you do have to be mentally and physically ready for these challenges, especially in the last 20 feet. And if it's just grit you need, go back to relationships. Do you have Debbie Downers and people infecting your confidence who don't believe in you, who are dropping phrases? Basically implying that you don't have what it takes. In my book, I have Dara Torres, who won silver medal in the 2008 Olympics in Beijing at the age of 41 in the 50-meter freestyle. And if you didn't believe she could win a medal at the age of 41, you were not allowed in her presence in the 2 years leading up to those Olympics. She knew. Athletes know. Athletes have this small window of time in which they know they can optimize themselves, their brain, their body, their focus, to leave it all on the floor. So they get these lessons. They study with sports psychologists, but they also instinctively pick up that person. And for Dara Torres, her father, he wanted her to just get married and have kids. Stay out of my way. Get out of my lane, because I'm on my way. So you have to know who's toxic as well as who's going to hold you accountable. So there's a lot in that chapter that I think really can help. Good grit, but also how do you stay away from stupid grit, faux grit, or selfie grit? There are 3 kinds of bad grit.
There's so much just in that last few minutes alone. You mentioned the components of grit: passion, purpose, persistence or perseverance. How important is purpose? How important
Yeah.
is really finding meaning in what you do? We talk a lot about it on the show, but I'd just love to get your perspective on it.
Yeah. So Angela Duckworth is a wonderful friend of mine. And so I have followed her research, which was starting as I went back to Penn, and I kept seeing her running in and out of classrooms. So that's how I found out who she was and what she was doing. But because grit is baked into the pursuit of big goals, there has to be a quality inside of you that allows you to keep going, even if no one believes in you, even if you have so many dark nights of the soul, so many failures that you don't know if you can keep going. That's where purpose matters so much, because it's got to be your purpose. It's got to keep you going even when nobody else thinks you can achieve it. So that's why purpose, knowing what you do. Why do I wake up in the morning? Ikigai, the Japanese word ikigai. What do I wake up for? What do I wake up for that uses my top strengths, that makes the world better in some way? That's why purpose matters so much, because it's that rocket fuel that allows you to keep going. Because remember, we're talking about hard goals, not easy goals, hard goals. And purpose really matters when it comes to the hard goals.
Brilliant. And finally, the E of our bridge.
Yeah. So excellence, if you're just collecting data trash, for example, and you're just measuring everything, but you don't even know what excellence looks like, but you're gathering data that tells you you're on your way, you have to know, what does excellent look like? What is the record board that you're trying to get on? What are the criteria to be on that record board? What is excellent? And so everyone's got different levels of excellence because we're all at different places in life. And for ordinary grit, let's say you want to become a blogger, but you've never been on a computer before. What's the excellence in your learning goal? Well, you might just be learning to buy a computer and open and shut it and turn it on and off. And that kind of excellence can be really scary to people. So excellence means having a predefined criteria for what excellence looks like. And remember that being outside of your comfort zone is going to be the highest determinant of excellence. And it's going to be the thing that makes you proudest. So you can't just start with a fuzzy outcome, like I'm going to be better by September, or I'm going to be making more progress in the areas that are important to me, or I will be stronger. It has to be specific and it has to be excellent. So if you don't know that, you're just going to keep driving around looking for the airport, thinking I got to get on a flight, but I don't know where the airport is. That's how good it is.
And something implied in what you've just said, Caroline, is the fact that you've made that really small. So somebody who wants to be a blogger who has never actually typed on a PC before, their first step in the context of excellence was going out and buying a PC, learning how to switch it on.
Yep.
That
I
sounds
coach someone like that.
Right. Okay. I mean, what I'm hearing is that really chunk this down to the first kind of minimum viable action, which is in this case, go out and buy a computer. For somebody who wants to run a marathon, who's never ran before, analogous to what you've just said, is go and buy a pair of trainers, walk to the first lamppost in your street.
Yep.
So the excellence in relation to big goals has milestones, and it's really, really important. What I'm hearing is that we actually chunk that down. So you opened out at the start into kind of you're lobbying against the use of these other goal setting methodologies like SMART. What is it about? And everyone listening to this will know this acronym at this stage, albeit there's different interpretations. But what is it about kind of SMART goal setting that you have a bugbear with?
Well, the minute I read goal setting theory, which again is simple, it's parsimonious because they wanted to keep it clear and clean, which is so beautiful. It's not a complicated theory, it's an open theory. So it's open to change as people get more findings. But basically, once you read that, you know that the definition of SMART, as it's widely known, specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, time-bound, I think that's the most common breakdown of that acronym, doesn't fit goal-setting theory. Realistic goals are called low goals in goal-setting theory. So when you're setting realistic goals or even attainable goals, what you're doing is you're staying inside of your comfort zone. You know you can accomplish it. So you will be getting a result, but it will not be your best result. So as I looked deeper and deeper in it, because my first reaction was, my God, this doesn't match the number one theory of 73 theories on motivation. I started to look into it. Well, where'd it come from? So of course, it just came from a dude writing an article for a management journal, and he just picked an acronym on the way to give a workshop. He picked an acronym. Damn thing was sticky. It was sticky and memorable. And this is the danger of marketing when it's memorable, because it doesn't always do good. So as I looked at that, I thought, okay, this dude, he's not scientific. He doesn't know anything about evidence, but he sure found a great acronym. And it's okay. It's like the tip of the iceberg. It's okay, but it's not great. So then I found there are 55 different definitions of SMART goals out there. So it actually qualifies for what's called jargon mishmash syndrome. It doesn't mean anything. So not only is it not scientific, not only does it not match goal setting theory, not only are you likely to undercut your chances of optimal success, but it means 55 different things. So it's a zombie theory walking among us that should just be killed off, because going back to the beginning, we're in a period just like after the Black Death. We need to become evidence-based, and goal setting has not been disrupted in any meaningful way since 1881. time and motion studies with Taylorism. Frederick Winslow Taylor sitting at the Midvale Steel Factory in 1881 with a little kind of piece of paper, just watching how quickly or how not quickly people moved their arms or their legs. You know, how much more efficient can we get? In some ways, we've never really disrupted the field of goal setting. Because these productivity systems were all aimed at optimizing white men's performance in the workplace without ever considering gender differences. Even though there were two women, if you read the book, you know there were two women in the early 1900s who, if we had listened to them, if we had listened to Mary Parker Follett and Lillian Gilbreth, we wouldn't have all the issues we have with well-being in the workplace. We wouldn't have the issues with group harmony. We wouldn't have those. They were on top of it, but it was too soon for people to listen to women. But in no meaningful ways had goal setting ever been disrupted. In much the same way, education had not been disrupted until computers came along, and then COVID, where remote education is like, wow, we can do this. So it was time to disrupt goal setting.
Well, hopefully you have created the bridge to bigger goals away from something that isn't smart. So on that note, I just indulged myself there, Caroline. I thought that was...
Thank you. Thank you very much. I loved it.
Something you have, just before we move into the close, you have wonderful supplemental resources. The book's full of resources, but right at the end, you pack it with resources. I love this notion. It's something that I have actually completed before, is the letter to your future self. Can you share with our listeners practically what is the essence of the letter to your future self?
Yeah, so while I was writing the book, I ran into even better research, because that's well known that you write a letter to yourself in the future, either a year or 5 years or even 10 years. You imagine your life as if everything has gone as well as possible. It could even be called future positive self. Best possible future self is what positive psychology calls it. But if you write a letter to yourself, newer research found that that future self has to write back to present day self saying how you did it. So if you're writing to future self and saying, oh my gosh, it's a year from now and I'm able to fund a book drive for the local library, I have some excess funds, I'm able to have dinner 5 nights a week with my family, et cetera, the future self writes back and says, and this is how all these things happened. This was the strategy that worked. These were the people who made it possible for me to succeed. That's when you really start to think more deeply about the strategy. So that's one thing. And if you'll indulge me for a second, the other major thing in the book that has gotten so much notoriety is that we have not until very recently challenged the research on motivation and goal setting to ask, if it works for men, will it work for women? And what we're finding is a lot of the well-meaning advice that people go on to podcasts and often hear, because most podcast listeners are women, but most podcasts are men talking to other men about men. And so you'll hear a lot about special forces or presidents, but not always relatable role models that women can identify with. Wikipedia is doing everything they can to change that, because 82% of the biographies in Wikipedia are of men. 18% are of women. Therefore, women have to have relatable role models to set big goals. So we're just now starting to see that the advice that's been given out, that's so commonly held out there, doesn't always work for women. One thing that I think you mentioned a little earlier is, if you join a company and you go to happy hours and you go to, meet your new colleagues, and you're told to do that by the people who hired you, what happened is men who do that are wildly successful, and they get benefits and they get lionized for being committed to the firm. When women do exactly the same behavior, it's been found that it works against them. And this is like a silent penalty strike that's happening. Women don't even know this is happening. I didn't know this until about a month ago when I found this research, that women who go out and go to happy hours and meet their colleagues, they're seen as selfish, cold, self-absorbed, and it works against them. And so only now in the 21st century, in the literally around the 20th year, are we looking at this research on things like giving and reciprocity and leaning into salary negotiations and networking and how you dress and how you behave. So much of the advice that was given out kind of with a blind eye, like this works for everyone, they're finding that it works against women. So be careful is what I'm saying in this book. Make sure that the advice you're following has been found to work for people who look like you and sound like you, and not just the predominant group that's been in the workplace since 1881.
Here, and we need more Carolines out there. I mean, the uh, stats that you just quoted from Wikipedia are actually similar to what we see coming into our program. It's only 20% of the CEOs, the leaders of SMEs who step into our world are females. And we need
Right.
more female role models. We need more female scaling leaders. They bring a different perspective. I'm very fortunate. My business partner, Claire, is just an incredible female leader. And in fact, on season 15, when we wrapped up, we talked about the importance of reciprocity. We talked about the importance of giving. The fact that even I'm thinking as I reflect on the podcast, we are, all approaching 200 episodes, and I must actually review back to see how many
Have been women.
females. Yeah.
I paid a researcher to find this out for me of the top 10 business podcasts, at least in the US. The average ratio was 5 men to 1 woman, 1 woman.
Yeah, and just as you say that, I'll be able to do that exercise straight after this, but that resonates. So,
Yeah.
so you need to refer me to more wonderful female role models who'll
Okay.
come on to the podcast. You have provided incredible advice. The last hour has just flown, Caroline. This is one of those episodes where I feel I'm going to have to replay and replay and replay, and it will be widely listened. I'm very, very confident of that by our listeners. Widely replayed. You conscious that you have given so much value. It is a tradition on the show to invite my guests to share with our audience 3 timeless takeaways.
Oh gosh. And you told me to think about this, but I do believe, and I always think, oh, I bet there's something new. Number one is you can't keep what you don't give away. And if there's a piece of information that you've gotten here or somewhere else that really made a difference in your life, it's really important to find somebody who doesn't have access to that knowledge, whether that knowledge is from academia or somebody wise in your life this other person doesn't have access to. You can't keep what you don't give away. And I'll just go back to my bulimia recovery, of which I'm very, very proud, because I got better at a time when nobody got better. People were dying from eating disorders, and that was the norm. Somebody said to me at a 12-step meeting, "That's great, you're getting better, Caroline, but you can't keep what you don't give away." And that's really what taught me what giving really was all about. So number one, you can't keep what you don't give away. Number two, other people matter. Make sure that the quality of people in your life make you a better man or woman, and then go out and make sure that you are doing that for other people with active, constructive responding, curiosity, and enthusiasm. And the third one is set big goals. Do hard things, because your conscious, your subconscious is going to know if it's not proud of what you did that day. And it's really important to challenge yourself to see what you're made of, to see who your support system is, and to see what you're capable of and how your character strengths have helped you. So that's where I'm going to leave it.
So profound. And speaking of big goals, it would be remiss of me not to ask you, beyond the book, and I wish you every success with it, what is your next big goal?
Ooh, I've got a bunch. First of all, I have a certificate program coming, because so many people want to learn these fundamentals and take it into their companies, and I can't coach everybody. So this certificate program will be unveiled in the next 3 months. Next thing is, I already have a book underway about how women can create and be in mastermind groups that are supportive, that allow them to dream big and not be interrupted every time they open their mouths. I mean, women aren't even used to being allowed to be experts in anything because they're always mansplained. And so that's the next goal. And the third one is that I was very close to being top 15 in the country in masters swimming right before COVID, and I'm a competitive swimmer now, and I just I want to get into that top 15 again. Well, I was like 14 or 11 in one event. So
That's a
that's the
big goal.
yeah, that's
That's
a
a
very
big
big
goal.
goal. God, older women are fierce athletes, let me tell you.
Yeah, I see it in our own triathlon club. I don't even try to
I
compete with them.
bet. And they were waiting in carpool lines till their early 40s, and then they burst
Exactly.
out, and the times are
So
unbelievable.
true. So
Oh my
true.
gosh,
So
women,
true.
they're tough.
Caroline, people will be fascinated, I know, with this conversation. I'm confident they'll be curious for more. Where best to connect with you? Where best to find out more about your work?
Two places. The book has its own website, biggoalsbook.com, and then my name takes you to anything you could ever want, carolinemiller.com. And I've learned to have an ask, even though women who ask are seen as cold, cold and self-absorbed. It's so important that I get Amazon reviews of my book. And the reason why is something I said about 30 minutes ago. This is the one area where women have not been allowed to make progress, is being goal directed, being agentic and goal directed, running for president of the United States, for example. Women are not allowed to have big goals. So me, a woman writing about big goals, my publisher is looking for Amazon reviews that say the book matters. And so that's my one ask of your audience. If they read the book, like the book, please. It matters more than I thought it did.
You've heard it here, folks. Go in, get the book, provide the review. I'm going to do that after this, Caroline.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful book. I really, really enjoyed it. Love the acronym. Love the fact that it's steeped in science. I absolutely revere your passion. Your knowledge is so rich and so deep. My goodness, in the context of 70-minute podcast, you've packed so much in there. I appreciate the fact that
Yeah.
you've
Thank
really
you.
devoted your career to the next part of your career to getting to evangelizing this, the importance of this, and certainly it's so critically important in the context of what we do. So I wish you every success with the book. I want to thank you for today, and I look forward to staying in touch and tracking your times, your swim times.
Give me a few more
You've
months before
committed to it.
US Masters swimming. Give me about 6 more months to do the hard sets again.
You've committed to it. Caroline, thank you. Take care.
Thank you very much.